and there was an incredible amount of moral decay. I mean, you read stories about what was going on in Germany during that time, and it'll flip your wig. You had 13-year-old girls doing prostitution. That's how bad it was. So it wasn't boredom that led to fascism. It was a sense that people had lost their relationship to their land, to their culture, and as a result of that, they had both economic and moral bankruptcy. It's not boredom. Not boredom. Out of that vacuum, out of that void, Adolf Hitler rises. Right? That's what happens. It's not boredom. In terms of communism, you lived there. People were not bored. They were not bored, Sergei. Communism was started in New York City. Yeah, that's right. New York City. Jacob Schiff, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. They were all engaged in starting the communist revolution and making it happen, supporting it financially. I talked a bit about it yesterday. So it wasn't boredom. People weren't bored in Russia. Geez, I'm bored. Hey, let's start a revolution. And isn't communism really much closer to globalism, which is what Google is actually pimping out? This guy is supposed to be extremely bright and has had the intellectual wherewithal to start an incredibly successful company, thanks in large part to DARPA and the CIA, the NSA, and Stanford. Of course, everybody can use a little hand up. Just crank that algorithm. Because you can crank a good algorithm doesn't necessarily make you an insightful person when it comes to historical events. He then asks his company what they can do to ensure a better quality of governance and decision making. What can we do to ensure this? And according to Kent Walker, VP for Global Affairs, those who support populist causes like the MAGA movement are motivated by fear, xenophobia, hatred, and a desire for answers that may or may not be there. Well, let's just break that statement down. Fear. Are they motivated by fear? I would say no. Fear exists just about everywhere. Fear is a condition. People on the left experience fear. Do you think they're afraid of the MAGA people? You're damn right. Of course they are. So they have their own little phantom of fear that haunts them. Xenophobia. I don't think so. I mean, I think people, by and large, are tired of having or being told how to live their lives, number one, how to think, how to speak, what products to buy, what not to buy, what foods to eat, what foods not to eat. I think there's a general rebellion around those things. Even if these voices in their head believe that they are telling them things that are both important and true. Whether they are or not remains to be seen. But those voices are the voices that the people on the right or the MAGA people or whatever, they want to get those voices out of their head. And finally there was a voice that was louder than those voices, and that voice was Donald Trump. He got above that noise threshold, and he had a message, and the message resonated with them because they saw what was happening to this country. Now, if you're on the left, you saw, oh, everything's really great, everything's fantastic, things are going according to plan, and we'll have the soft takeover finish in about 15 to 20 years. We've been working on the educational system. We've got a really strong ally in China. We'll be running the show. We're smarter. We're the engineers not only of products, but society as well. There are people who are non-compliant. Sorry. It happens. Non-compliance happens. Okay, what else do we have here? He later says that Google needs to fight to ensure that populist movements around the world are merely a blip and a hiccup in the arc of history that bends towards progress. Bends towards progress. Okay. What does that mean, progress? What does it mean? Look, I'll be honest with you. If their version of progress was so inclusive that that people who would say, oh, it's okay to be white were part of that progress, if it was that inclusive, I'd probably have less of a problem with it, to be honest with you. But they're not inclusive. Their inclusivity is an exclusive and limited club and membership that is exclusive of certain groups. It's not fully inclusive. If it was, I would say great. Now, the video has been taken down. I'm going to read you some of the timecode comments. At 000 to 112, Google co-founder Sergey Brin states that the weekly meeting is probably not the most joyous we've had, that most people here are pretty upset and sad. 24 seconds in, Brin contrasts the disappointment of Trump's election with his excitement at the legalization of cannabis in California, triggering laughs and applause from the audience of Google employees. 0 to 112 again, returning to seriousness, Brin says he is deeply offended by the election of Trump and that the election conflicts with many of Google's values. At 000 to 910, 0910, trying to explain the motivations of Trump supporters, Senior VP for Global Affairs, Kent Walker, this guy's a piece of work, includes fear not just in the United States but around the world is feeling concerns, xenophobia, hatred, and a desire for answers that may or may not be there, which we talked about. 0 to 935, Walker goes on to describe the Trump phenomenon as a sign of tribalism that's destructive in the long term. At 00955, striking an optimistic tone, Walker assures Google employees that despite the election, history is on our side, and that the moral arc of history bends towards progress. Really? What has been the moral arc of history? What can Walker, Mr. Walker, share with us where the boner of moral history has bended towards progress? What would he define progress as? I'm just curious. Walker approvingly quotes former Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's comparison between the world of the wall, with its isolation and defensiveness, and the world of the square, the piazza, the marketplace, where people come together into a community and enrich each other's lives. Look, I don't have a problem with the marketplace or the plaza or the square. I don't. I think it's and the idea that people from different cultures, different countries can actually have a place where they can commingle, that's fine. But Mr. Walker is completely and utterly out to sea again. Why doesn't he go to Dearborn, Michigan and have a little tour around Dearborn, Michigan, and let's see how inclusive that is. Let's see what their marketplace, what their square is. Because even though there is not a fence or border or wall, Dearborn, Michigan has become so saturated with the Muslim community, the Muslim culture, that it has become its own, almost its own country unto itself. You know, there's a funny little word that they use for it called Dearbornistan. So that is not entirely inclusive. It has become its own sort of walled-in fortress by its own culture. In Sweden, they have no-go zones. No-go zones. Like, you just don't go there. Why don't you go to the marketplace or the piazza somewhere in a no-go zone in Sweden? Let's put your ideas to test, Mr. Walker. Why don't you go to areas in Southern California where there is absolutely no social integration? People people, families from Mexico have basically become communities unto themselves. What's their marketplace or piazza like? It is not inclusive. This idea, maybe in an urban center, maybe in a city, you could have that wonderful enrichment of each other's cultures. Well, what are you drinking today? I'm having a mint tea. It's a very powerful mint tea. What are you drinking today? I'm having a triple latte. Oh, I see. Hmm. And your triple latte has a dairy product in it? Yes, it does. Well, our culture does not allow for dairy product. Really? Well, our culture does. Well, you're upsetting me now because you are having a dairy product in my presence. I'd like you to pour your dairy product out now, please. But this is my dairy. I'm sorry. You're offending me. You're offending me. These people are fucking out the lunch. Yes, it would be great if we have. You know, I've told this story many times. I lived in Oakland. I managed an apartment building in Oakland, right on the edge of I mean, it's right there, man, on the front lines. I had people from basically the inner city. I had some people from other countries living in my apartment building. I had a really sweet guy that lived beneath my apartment from Senegal. And I used to do tarot readings for him and his daughter and his friend, and they'd bring me food. Man, it was great. I got no problem with this. I have no problem with it. None. The difference here is that what's been taking place in the United States and pretty much the world over for the last 20 years is that globalization has been weaponized. It is not about a country that is truly in crisis. If it is in crisis, we probably created the crisis. It's not about that. Globalization has been weaponized. And it's not only just been weaponized on the streets with what's happening in any part of the United States or Europe or wherever. It's been globalized in the marketplace as well. Right? Globalization has been weaponized in the marketplace as well with outsourcing to various countries, China, India, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's keep going here. At 1310, Ruth Porat appears to break down in tears when discussing the election result. I'd call that the Nicki Minaj effect. Porat promises that Google will use the great strength and resources. We will use the great strength and resources available to us. And reach. Yes, we have to continue to advance really important values. We will use it. We have the Leviathan. Unleash the Kraken. Porat promises that Google will use the great strength. Yes, really. At 1650, stating, we all need a hug. Isn't that so funny? Let's kill the motherfuckers! Oh, we all need a hug. Kill him! She then instructs the audience of Google employees to hug the person closest to them. Oh. 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 Can you imagine what's going on in their head? Oh, I know this guy. He's got fucking bad breath. Do I want to hug him? Oh, shit. He always has Indian every night. And then he smokes a cigarette and has a cup of coffee in the morning. At 2024, Ellen Naughton, VP of People Operations, promises that Google's policy team in DC is all over the immigration issue and that the company will keep a close watch on it. We're all over it. Don't worry. We have your back. We have their back. They will no longer be wetbacks. They will be dry. They will come here. We will bring them to Google. We will set up an immigrant city right here. And each and every one of you will get to take one of these wonderful people home at night.